unfounded evictions and unwarranted restrictions on care home visiting. And they told us that residents and loved ones should feel empowered to speak out if they're unhappy without repercussions. And they said that the Care Quality Commission already takes action if it finds providers in breach of regulations, and that includes failures to deal properly with complaints. So what do you say to that?
I think the problem is you're relying on reports being made to the Care Quality Commission. The fact is that many relatives are frightened to go there because they don't really trust the system. They think reprisals will occur. And I think we need a much more proactive engagement by government and the CQC into dealing with this. And listening to Anne's experience, it just makes me renew my determination to press on with this and try and persuade the government to take this more seriously.
The Care Quality Commission, as you said, is the regulator responsible for looking at care homes. Way back in November 2016, they told this programme, You and Yours, when we had done an investigation, that they would start collecting figures about residents who had been evicted and relatives who had been banned from visiting after making complaints. When we checked again a bit later, it wasn't happening. Are you saying it is still not happening?
Well, I haven't seen those figures, and I think that's disappointing. And I would just mention the report by the Competition and Markets Authority in 2019, which said that some care homes may be relying on termination clauses in contracts to unfairly evict residents by way of reprisals for families making complaints. They are a hard-headed economic regulator. I think we should listen to them.
That was the Labour PR Lord Hunt. Well, we asked the regulator, the Care Quality Commission, to come on to You and Yours, but they didn't have anyone available today. On the subject of that promise they made to this programme to keep track of evictions from care homes and why those evictions were happening, the Care Quality Commission told us that the data collection has started, but it was paused during the pandemic until March of last year to ease pressure on providers. And they say that they now need some time to analyse the figures that they have. Lots of emails coming in to you about bees and other creatures taking residence in their homes. Sarah says, I have honeybees in the loft of our conversion stables. They've been there for many years and I have had no problems. It's really about coverage and driven with wax and the clothes knots and rats and stuff being attracted to bees. But anyway, no problem, Sarah says. I've checked them a couple of times a year and then they just leave them to it. I also have bumblebees nesting in the outside wall in my main loft. I have a huge colony of bats. I think all of them are wonderful. Andrew says, bees were removed from my roof by local people. Brilliant. The bees were all taken alive and well. And then the roof tenant was sprayed with almond oil, which seems to have successfully discouraged them from getting bad. And on the programme tomorrow, we'll be talking about potential cuts to bus services as emergency COVID funding comes to an end. And asking, is now the time to start renting rather than buying new gadgets? And it looks like a fish and it sounds like a fish. Could be gluggle jug be the next must-have for your home? It could be Peter White answering that question tonight just after 12:15. Thanks for listening today.
You and Yours is produced by Tara Holmes. Studio managers were Philip Cadwell and John Cole. We'll join Sarah Moulton for an hour-long edition of the World Economic Activity. First, time for a weather update for Scottish Shepherd.
Thank you very much, Neil, and a very good afternoon to you. A spell of cold weather is upon us as a cold front swept across the country over the last 24 hours. It's turned quite wintry across Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of the Pennines, the Welsh hills as well. So through this afternoon, it is these more northern areas that will continue to get wintry showers, not just in the hills and the mountains, but in coastal areas as well. And with that, also the possibility of some thunderstorms, some brief thunderstorms. That Met Office is warning Scotland and Northern Ireland at risk of these thunder snow showers through this afternoon and this evening. Now further south across the country, across the rest of England and Wales, it is going to be a chilly day. And I remind you that the winds are very blustery wherever you are today. It will be a chilly day with showers. However, the showers won't be quite so wintry further south, mostly of the rain. And there'll be some sunny spells around as well. So it's certainly not all grey clouds and rain today. There will be plenty of bright weather from time to time. The temperatures today, not particularly low across the south of the country, more like 10 degrees, for example, in Southampton, but it is in the north where it'll be cold. The lowlands of Scotland, Northern Ireland, only around 3 degrees this afternoon. That takes us into this evening and overnight. The winds will tend to ease, the showers will become less frequent, and actually by Friday morning the skies will be clear and the sun will be shining, and Friday promises to be a much calmer day with far fewer showers. It will be on the chilly side, however, there is certainly plenty of sunshine on offer. And quickly the weekend, not looking bad for most. Neil, back to you.
Many thanks, Dr. On FM, on Not Very Bad, on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 4.
Hello and welcome to an extended edition of The World at Once with me, Sarah Monty. Missiles hit the capital of Ukraine as Russian troops advance from the north, the south and the east of the country. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, tells us he's scared for his people.
We fight for our people.
Western leaders condemn the invasion, but their response will be financial, not military.
Today, in concert with our allies, we will create a massive package of economic sanctions designed in time to halt the Russian war.
In this hour-long program, we'll get the latest from Ukraine, from Russia, and discuss what more can be done to protect the people of Ukraine. The BBC News is read by Caroline. Russia has begun a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, sending troops by land and sea and launching cruise and ballistic missiles. Ukraine says Russian armoured columns have entered the country from many directions, including from occupied Crimea and from Belarus to the north. Fierce fighting is being reported in eastern Ukraine, with dozens of deaths on both sides. NATO has called Russia's attack entirely unjustified and unprovoked. Our correspondent, James Waterhouse, sent this report from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
It was the wake-up call Ukrainians in the capital never wanted. A series of explosions, loud bangs, out of sight over the horizon from several directions. Then reports of Russian troops shelling and crossing the border from multiple points, including Odessa to the south and Kharkiv to the east. Here in Kyiv, air raid sirens and police vehicles urging people to get to safety, led to thousands trying to leave. Then queues at cash points, petrol stations and supermarkets. Later in the morning, another explosion, closer to the centre. The streets are the quietest they've been. There's also a lingering smell of smoke. For the first time there are police patrols, as well as military personnel and vehicles weaving around the cobbled roads. President Zelensky has said weapons will be issued to anyone who wants to defend Ukraine, and has announced a cutting of all diplomatic ties with Russia.
Boris Johnson has accused President Putin of unleashing a tidal wave of violence, saying that his hideous and barbaric venture must end in failure. In a televised address, the Prime Minister said he'd spoken to President Zelensky to offer the UK's continued support in ensuring that the flame of freedom once again blazed bright in Ukraine. He promised what he called a massive package of economic sanctions.
A vast invasion is underway, by land, by sea, and by air. Ukraine is a country that for decades has enjoyed freedom and democracy and the right to choose its own destiny. We and the world cannot allow that freedom just to be snuffed up. We cannot and will not just look away.
The Kremlin insists its military operation in Ukraine will last as long as is necessary. President Putin, who announced the action early this morning, is said to be preparing for a State of the Nation address. But there's a sense of shock among many ordinary Russians. Our correspondent, Carrie Davis, is on the Russian side of the border with Ukraine and sent this report.
Russia has spent months denying that it was planning to invade Ukraine. President Putin said that the aim of the special military operation was, in his words, demilitarization and denazification of the country. He called the West an evil empire and threatened that anyone who intervened would suffer consequences that they had never seen in their history. Russia's state media, which have ferociously defended the president, have shown no sign of changing tack. But on social media, some Russian influencers with millions of followers posted pictures of black squares with the caption, "No to war." They stopped short of criticising Putin. An open letter against the military operation has already gained over 170 signatures by Russian journalists and academics, and may grow further. On the streets of Moscow, there's a sense of disbelief among many ordinary Russians that their country could go to war with Ukraine. There are queues at banks as people try to withdraw their money, worried of the economic consequences of the invasion.
There's been shock and condemnation for Russia from the international community. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg described the invasion as cold-blooded and said the alliance was on high alert. Governments around the world are now considering how to respond to Russia's actions. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley reports.
Days, weeks of frantic diplomacy and economic threats failed to stop President Putin. The crisis talks across Western capitals now are on how to respond to the invasion. Britain and America are promising a decisive and united response to what they've called a blatant violation of international law. European leaders meet later today, planning the harshest sanctions the EU has ever implemented. The NATO military alliance has announced that it's sending more forces to protect member countries in the east. China is urging all parties to show restraint, but is refusing to call Russia's dramatic overnight move an invasion.
Oil prices have reached their highest level for more than 7 years, surging past the significant point of $100 a barrel. Russia is the second biggest exporter of crude oil and the world's largest natural gas exporter. The invasion is hitting stock markets around the world. Our business correspondent Theo Leggett has the details.
Europe is heavily dependent on Russia for supplies of both oil and gas. A significant part of it flows through pipelines across Ukrainian territory. Fears that those supplies could be disrupted have pushed up the price of Brent crude oil sharply to well over $100 a barrel, while the cost of gas on European wholesale markets has increased by more than 30%. Fears that high energy prices will cause economic harm, along with the prospect of further sanctions, have driven share prices downwards in London and across Europe. In Moscow, share indexes plummeted more than 30%, wiping huge sums off the value of leading companies. The Russian currency, the ruble, has fallen to record lows against the dollar and the euro. The price of gold, often seen as a haven for investors in times of trouble, touched its highest level in nearly a year and a half.
The government is insisting that its proposals for major changes to further education funding in England would be fairer to students, graduates and taxpayers. Under the plans, the period over which graduates repay their student loans would increase from 30 years to 40. Consultation on the proposals has begun. Labour described them as a stealth tax on graduates. Caroline, thanks. Despite all the warnings, the news this morning scarcely seemed credible. Russia had invaded a European country. It's a headline from another age. But as it's the 21st century, we have constantly updated news. The latest that the shelling and explosions around the capital Kyiv and other big cities is continuing. That tanks have crossed the border from Belarus in the north, from Russia in the east, and from Crimea in the south. And we know that at least 40 Ukrainian soldiers are reported killed, possibly many thousands more. But the first signs of the invasion came from a very 21st century technology. It was at 3:15 this morning that Google Maps showed a traffic jam on the road from Belgorod in Russia to the Ukrainian border. A convoy of Russian armour and troops. It was at about 3 a.m. our time, 5 a.m. in Ukraine, that the first missiles landed. Kiev, Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, Mariupol, Odessa. Towns and cities across Ukraine were hit by airstrikes. Google Maps now shows traffic jams heading out of the capital Kyiv to the west. An exodus that started with the first air raid sirens in the early hours. As the invasion started, President Putin broadcast that this was a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. That it was about protecting the country from those who took it hostage. And he gave this warning.
Whoever tries to interfere with us or threaten our country should know that Russia's response will be immediate and lead to such consequences that have never been experienced in history.
In the film, he's wearing the same suit and tie that he was seen in on Monday night. And the metadata on the video suggests that it was recorded at that time. It adds to the evidence that the decision to invade was taken some time ago. Ukraine's President Zelensky, his message to his nation appeared to have been filmed on his mobile phone.
нашій військовій інфраструктурі.
Russia has carried out strikes on our military infrastructure and on our border guards and border detachments. Explosions were heard in many cities in Ukraine. We are imposing martial law in all regions of our state.
The assault on Ukraine unfolded at Security Council's holding a special session in New York, chaired by Russia. At its close, the Ukrainian ambassador said this to Russia's ambassador.
I welcome the decision for some members of this council to meet as soon as possible to consider the necessary decision to condemn the aggression that you launched on my people. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell.
Well, we don't yet know how the West will respond. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said he'll bring in a massive package of sanctions to hobble the Russian economy. And he said the West must end its dependence on Russian oil and gas. We'll have more on possible response later in the programme. First, though, our correspondent Nick Beak has been speaking to the residents of Kyiv throughout the morning.
The sirens have just started here in the capital Kyiv. Like so many people, we were woken up by the sounds of explosions, and people across the country are reporting the same thing. The invasion, the attack that Russia promised would never happen, has now started, and the Ukrainian government is urging people to stay calm, and it's appealing to the international community to stop President Putin now.
I have my laptop for my work and study, and I take some things for hygiene.
At the city's Golden Gate, we meet Lana, one of many people we see carrying bags and suitcases, trying to find a way out of the city to a safer place.
I can't say all what I feel and what we do now, but it's very, very nervous, and I very scared. But I must be strong.
Well, this feels like one of the safest places in the city today, not just because there are lots of soldiers about, but because the metro is doubling up as a bomb shelter. And overnight families have come down here, they're trying to follow the news of what's happening, and they're trying to work out what they're going to do next. We spot the face of 2-year-old Yegor. He's still smiling. But Mum Yelena and Dad Alexander are worried.
The war started.
I'm very, very scared for my boy, he tells me. Then, both parents ask, where are NATO to help us? Back outside, we meet sales manager Mark, a reservist. When the bombs started falling overnight, he helped his neighbours leave their homes. He tells me he's now ready to fight on the front line and die for his country.
It's only one way to serve our country, our children, our mothers, and defend our country from Russian occupation. And we will fight all day. We want to have help from our friends, such as Great Britain and other countries, USA, Poland, Germany, and other countries.
It's still eerily quiet here in the heart of the capital. It seems many have followed government advice to stay at home. Lots of people will have also heard Russia's claim that it carried out targeted strikes on the Ukrainian military. I've got to tell you, people here are saying it doesn't feel like that to them. Instead, they feel that they're under attack and that President Putin has declared war on them.
Nick Beak reporting from Kyiv. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Vitaly Klitschko. He's now the mayor of Kyiv, but of course many will know him as the former professional boxer. I asked about the situation in his city now.
We heard everybody in our city bombing attack. It's explosion everywhere around the city. Was huge explosion. The people were shocked, and we received the information. And military base and an airport was bombing. And after that, we received the information. The Russians tanks and Russian army crossed the border of Ukraine. And bombing alarm was our city. And people in the panic. They want to leave the